Carmel Church Station is a large entitled greenfield. According to an independent analysis, CCS is projected to bring over the life of the development over 47,000 jobs, $19 billion of economic impact, and annually at full build-out, $55 million of tax revenue to the county. By moving forward tonight, our project becomes that much more immediately feasible and marketable for a large end user such as the federal government or major corporation. By moving forward tonight, major development partners will look more intently at the opportunities of Carmel Church Station, since there is a mechanism in place for aiding with the large upfront infrastructure needs. By moving forward tonight, the state has added incentive to move forward on the rail station, knowing that there is a financing mechanism that can help fund the actual train station. In the end, the proposal being considered tonight has the potential to accelerate job creation, infrastructure improvement, tax revenues, and economic development. Sometimes it is hard to find win-wins in this day of economic complexity. 40 states in the country have utilized land-secured financing. Since 2000, municipalities across the country have utilized more than $63 billion of development district financing to fund infrastructure for new development. 21 CDAs have issued bonds in Virginia, with numerous other localities in the process of establishing CDAs. In this extremely competitive economic environment, we believe this particular proposal is a necessary tool for the advancement of the county and is truly a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And, if you maybe want to have a seat down front, if the board has any questions afterwards, we certainly ask them. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board in favor of or in opposition to this new ordinance? One last call. Is there anyone who would like to address the board in opposition to or in favor of this additional ordinance? Does the board have any questions of Mr. Thompson? We now declare the public hearing closed. Tommy, doesn't seem to be any questions for you. Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson? How does the board wish to handle this issue?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize staff to advertise a public hearing for proposed ordinance that would allow CDAs, community development authorities, to be created in Carolina.
This is public hearing.
I'm sorry.
This will be approval of the ordinance.
6.
Yeah. So just approve.
Yeah, we just approved the ordinance. That's all. That's your motion.
Approve the ordinance? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Thomas, that we approve the ordinance as outlined in the board packet. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion is carried. All right. Going on to item number 7, unfinished business. Adoption of proposed Caroline County policy guidelines for approval of the creation of Community Development Authority. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You do have the updated policy guideline that the attorneys have provided for the board to ensure the safe utilization of CDAs in Caroline County and to remove the financial burden of evaluating CDAs, as well as the protection against their performance in the future by adding certain financial requirements for applicants.
Do you have questions of the attorney or of Mr. Wilson concerning the policy?
I think, Mr. Chairman, we had decided while we were discussing this before that each CDA application is different. And although we create a policy and guidelines, each CDA application could theoretically have different requirements, different information for the most part.
It will be different information, but these would set the policy for the general information.
For general, but if
that's
one
going
is
to be required. Some may have, for whatever reason, we'll have additional information, or may not be applicable. I can't think of a particular instance, but this is the general requirement for each and every application.
Yeah, I mean, in Mr. Thompson's case, we're specifically specifically going to talk about the rail station,
Correct.
things that may affect that. That would be in the CDA specifically for that. Somebody else may be doing a golf course resort through a CDA. They would have specific requirements for that. But the guidelines are really what we're approving now or looking at now.
Yes, sir.
Just as a general tool.
Yes, sir.
We're good?
Okay. Any other questions, comments? As the board wish to handle this, do you wish to approve the guidelines as outlined here?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, motion by Mr. Underwood, is there a second?
I second.
Second by Mr. Taylor, that we approve or we adopt the proposed Caroline County policy guidelines for approval of the creation of a community development authority. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay, and the motion is carried. Number 8, proposed adjustments to interfund accounts and budget appropriation to reflect elimination of loan from general fund to utility funds and program income funds. Ms. Hatchery, you're on the stage.
Good evening, gentlemen.
You got a real nice smile, so go ahead and finish. Tell us what you got to say.
Basically, I don't have a whole lot more to say than I said the last time.
Okay.
We have gone back at the request of Mr. Seeley to find some additional information. I've contacted John Sieg, I have contacted the auditors, gone through everything. The numbers I had before are the numbers as they are, as reported in the audits. We're basically trying to eliminate the due to froms because of the fact that they'll probably never ever be paid. I can't guarantee that they are totally accurate. In the case of the Dawn wastewater plant and the housing fund, it is not accurate because the board had already agreed to fund those projects, not loan the money to those projects. And it's a matter of cleaning it up by cleaning the due to froms. It gives the board, the citizens, local authorities, a truer value of what our fund balance is. Right now it's inflated because of that, and I'm basically just trying to clean up the books.
Okay. Of course, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Thomas, you were here during those periods. I do not recall, and I've indicated this before, I do not recall a $6 million transfer. I do recall a loan, if you want to call it that, from the general fund to the utility fund back in the mid-2000. I don't recall what year it was. You said it was 2005, and that sounds good to me. My concern now is the fact that the fund balance is inflated, and I'm afraid that we may get carried away thinking we have one number to deal with as far as cash flow is concerned, and really we do not have that. So I think it is important that we do go forward and to make the fund balance truly what it actually is, and deal with it at this point. I just don't see any sense in just continuing to prolong it and push it off and not take action at this point in time.
Well, we've set in motion internally, again last year, that availability fees for governmental projects, we are actually recording those revenues now where we weren't recording them before, things of that nature. So it's a cleaner process of what we're going through, and if it's a transfer to the fund, it's a transfer.
And I think that's important that people know is the fact that there were many things that were done in the name of utilities, the fund, when it should have come out of the general fund because it was for general government. The schools, for instance, whenever we connected or ran lines to the new schools and to the existing schools, it came out of the utility fund, but it should have come out of the general government
correct.
fund account. The same thing with this.
Development.
Yeah,
We did that for businesses.
absolutely. But also, these buildings here, we did the same thing. When we hooked up to the town, we certainly used the guise of utility funds, but it should have come out of the general fund. So it's not like that we're subsidizing the general fund completely at this point, because it's monies that were charged to the utility fund that should not have been charged against the utility fund.
That's correct.
And that is our policy now, that in the event of an economic development entity where we say we'll provide you X, water, sewer, whatever, that funding will come from the general fund.
It'll show as a separate transfer from the general fund to the utility fund and be recorded as availability fees in the utility fund.
Or the profit fund, and I guess the profit fund goes, we transfer it into the general fund and then comes out and goes.
Whatever fund it comes out of, yeah. You will see the transfers in and out of both funds.
Because we did that with McKesson.
Mhm.
That area was about $400,000 or something that came out of the profit fund.
And I think Mr. Shebel gave us a report a while back that said there's close to $2 million in fund transfers that were done like that.
That's
So,
correct.
okay.
All right, okay. Does the board have a motion?
Well,
Oh, you-
I don't have a motion just yet. I would just, and I think we've said this before, but I think it's important that citizens understand that these are not new expenditures, and that these are, this is a cleanup method to try to get straight an actual figure. I just wouldn't want them to pick this up and think that these are transactions that have just taken place or that have not already been funded for whatever reason. Because it could be a little bit misleading if citizens don't understand the true picture. And we've said that before, but I just wanted to reiterate.
Mr. Black, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just want to get this straight. So before this time, you were calling it a loan. Basically, it was a loan from the general to the utility. Is that correct? And the utility, with the idea that the utility would pay it back to the general. Is that what I'm getting at?
I don't record it as a loan, no, sir. It's recorded as a due to from. The idea behind it is that you could say it's a loan, but if there's no expectation of repayment, it needs to be taken out because it's between, it's the county government as a whole. It just happens to be two different funds. So, I mean, it's like having a loan with your sister that you know you'll never get back. Well, how long are you going to carry it on your books that your sister owes you money?
So now we're no longer calling it a loan. We're saying it's like a subsidy or a transfer to utilities.
It's recorded in the audit as a due to and a due from. You can call it a loan if it's easier for to think of it that way, but the real term in our audit is it's a due to and a due from receivables and payables, whatever. You can call it almost anything you want.
But currently, we're doing transfers. We're not doing that anymore, but the audit
Okay,
still
that's
picks
what-
these.
that's
That's
what
what I thought I was
I'm-
hearing.
The
That's-
transfers
where-
actually show as an expense
That's
in
where
one
I am.
fund
Okay,
and a revenue in
okay. So
another fund.
now it's a transfer. So if the utilities, because we were talking last year of utilities being 1.3, the number that kept on being mentioned was 1.3 million, 1.3 million, and the number ended up being what, 750,000, 750 or so thousand. So we're saying that's a transfer that to utilities.
That is correct. These are things that go back to 2000.
Actually,
where-
it goes back before
that,
2000.
but it just built up over the years of due tos being recorded instead of transfers.
Sometimes they were done as transfers, sometimes they were done as a loan, sometimes they were done as both in the same year. At this point in time, I can't go back and tell you what the reasons were, why some were done as transfers, some were done as loans, some years had both.
Okay, just out of curiosity, I'm just kind of curious in this. In order to have like a zero transfer in a year from general fund to utilities, how many new homes would we have to? How many availability? How many new homes would we have to have?
A minimum of 75.
Excuse me.
A minimum of 75.
Would have to have a minimum of 75. Okay.
Well, you have to have a minimum of 75 connections
Okay.
At the full rate.
at the full rate.
And just out of curiosity, what did we have last year?
37,
37, I think.
40,
I heard,
something.
last year, 37.
37.
How
Okay.
many have we had this year?
We've had 32 applications for water, 31 applications for sewer. That's should be handed,
That's what you
hopefully,
just
this
gave us.
it's
Yeah,
up
yeah,
here.
that's right here, okay.
And we only budgeted 37 connections. And we had paid 16 for water and 15 for sewer paid so far this year.
Okay. Now, and once again, I got another question. So, when the meter is set, that's when we when the meter is set, that's when we get the fees, correct? When
That's correct.
The 8,000 and 8,500, correct, is when the meter is set?
That's correct.
So-
Y'all passed that in August.
And is it not true with utilities, and maybe Joey can help with this, if it's 2 months after,
When the board decided to have the extension that the availability fee was not due until the meter was set, I can no longer record any of them as a receivable. That began in August. I believe there's one or two that are in the number that you have that went back to 2012, but that
So
was
there were-
because they were paid in July and we recorded them before that.
So
Rule
there's
of
only
thumb
one-
is a 60-day accrual.
so there's only one or two that we're counting twice?
They're
No,
not counted
We're not counting
twice.
twice.
Okay.
Not
So
what
we're
I
not
just
counting
gave you.
twice.
We basically, because the board decided to
Okay.
give a 60
There was one or two
day-
that you went back and
Right.
added to last fiscal year.
Right.
And
Right,
then these
but
are
they
all-
might be in
This
Mr.
number that I've got
Schiebel's,
right here is all.
it might be in that number, I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. So from now on, it basically has to be in the fiscal, it has to be in the
From
fiscal
now
year.
on, it's basically going to be a cash basis because I don't have any way of knowing when they're going to pay the availability fee.
Okay.
And under the rule of thumb, you can
They're
only do
basically running 2
60-day.
months behind because we gave them a 60-day. It was the board giving the builders a break and saying, instead of paying when you do your fees,
Right.
then you can pay when you set the meter.
right,
So they
right,
got
right.
two months
Right,
of flow.
right. That's what yeah.
So April,
But
May, June, we're not counting.
But she's saying now is she can't go back and add to the previous fiscal year is what you're saying, right?
No.
Right, okay. I see, because before you could, if it was, if
Well,
the-
under generally accepted accounting principles, because of the fact that the board was allowing 90 days to pay for an availability fee from the time from the permit, 90 days, generally accepted government accounting principles only allow you to do a 60-day accrual. We only do a 60-day accrual in the general fund on the property taxes. Even though they may pay 90 to 120 days later, I can only accrue back 60 days. When you all change the format to give them years if they need it, I can no longer accrue them. So 2012 is the last year you'll see an actual receivable for availability fees. From on out, the availability fees will be on a cash basis.
okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Taylor, you have any other comments? Mr. Underwood? Question? Mr. Seeley?
Yes, sir.
All right.
What I was trying to do was take the 4 point, you're saying the total, for lack of a better word, IOU, is $4,188,036.
Just to the general fund and the utility fund, not the other two funds.
Right, just the utility fund.
Yes, sir.
So what I tried to do was take that to the utility fund line that you gave us to the second line from the bottom to make that fit in someplace.
Talking about where I have fund balance, retained earnings, and fund balance less utility fund receivable.
We have retained earnings utility fund.
My number has both utility funds, Dawn and Caroline Utility.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm trying to figure out, and before I go there, let me back up to one other thing. We had to transfer from the general fund $1.3 million last year for VRA securing a loan, correct?
That's correct.
Is that accounted for in here someplace?
I have no other way to account for it other than the way it is. I cannot record that as a loan in the utility fund.
That's
So
general
it's-
fund money.
Yeah, but it's for utilities.
It is for utilities. It's on the $20 million bond issue.
But it's considered general fund money.
It's considered general fund money right now because that's who had to pay for it.
Right.
But it's still utility money.
But that money is setting aside and will eventually come back to the county.
Right.
That's correct.
It is not
And
that
it would
this money
come
will
back
never
to
come
the
back to the
general
county.
fund.
And when it comes back, it'll come back to the
the
general
general
fund.
That's correct.
General fund money.
But it's still right now out of the general fund for utilities.
That's correct.
And then this year we have to transfer another, what, 500,000?
Yes, sir.
So it's 1.8 to VRA.
Yes,
It's
sir.
gone for the entire time of the loan?
It's gone for it's a rate covenant So as long as our debt service payments in a year on the utility fund are as high as they are, it'll be there. Once they start diminishing, some of that money will come back before then.
And I guess I'm just looking for, how do we account for that?
I don't understand. What do you mean?
I mean, it's still, we're
It's
still
not added
lending
into
money.
the due to from. I don't
That's what
have
I'm
a
saying.
way
We-
of adding that into the due to from.
We're trying to mix apples and oranges in the same basket here. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
From a standpoint, the $4.2 million roughly that she's talking about is to take care of a loan or due to the general fund for past years, 2000 on up, that has taken place. Keep in mind that also some of the funds that were borrowed for utility projects, a band that was borrowed for utility projects.
Well, we're going to go there in a minute.
Okay,
So
but that money, some of that money was used to buy fire trucks. And so not all the money that was borrowed for utilities went into utilities, but some of that money was used to buy a fire truck. Now, I guess Mrs. Hatch could go back if that's what you want, but again, the $1.8 million is something that's setting aside. That is a loan that will come back to the county, no question about it. Nobody has said when it comes back to the county. That's the issue.
but
But
let
it's not
me,
included in this $4.2 million.
Well, where is that 1.8 million now? That's not in the unencumbered balance.
That 1.8 million is nowhere on the county's books
Absolutely.
except
Okay.
as an expense.
well, let me,
And
and
then
let
we'll
me,
have a revenue in X
It-
number of years when it comes back.
That's correct.
when did we start with the ban as cash reserve?
4 years ago?
So 2000,
It's more than that.
It was 5 or 6 years ago. I
Yeah, it's
don't-
more than that.
6 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
and my point being is that 1.8 that's not in the fund balance, that's cash that we don't have access to, is still utility debt till it comes back because it's causing us to have to borrow money to actually operate the county, correct?
No, sir.
Well, if it's cash and it's $1.8 million.
It's a rate covenant, and it is not an unusual thing on very large issues, whether you have the funding or not, for them to do rate stabilization funds. You have a rate stabilization fund you all haven't been able to access in the general fund since 2002.
How much is that?
That's 600 and some odd thousand. That was on the courthouse building.
That we had to do. We didn't
Yeah.
want to do that.
No.
We had to do
But
that.
the rate, the fund is set aside, and you will not see that money until the end of the loan, but that is on the general fund side.
But I guess my point is, though, is that if the utility fund were healthy, that 1.8 would have come from utilities, not from the general fund.
Sir, what
Let
I'm
us have-
saying, even if the utility fund was healthy, more than likely, you would still have had to do that rate fund, because it's not unusual for very large issues that they require that set aside.
Ms. Hatch, wait just a minute. Mr. Seeley, if you want to have a discussion on whether the utility system is solvent and all the issues that's one thing. What we're trying to deal with, let me finish. What we're trying to deal with tonight is the $4.2 million that we're trying to get off the books and say, okay, it is no longer a loan from a utility because it's not going to be paid back by the utility fund. Now, if we want to talk about these other issues, that's an entirely separate discussion because this has nothing to do with the $4.2 million. None whatsoever. The issues that you've raised has absolutely nothing to do with the $4.2 million that she is presenting for transfer tonight in order to clear up the books on the loan, which is inflating our unencumbered balance. And that's the issue I have, is the fact that I don't see anytime soon that the utility fund is going to be able to pay back that $4.2 million. If you see a way to do it, fine, but I don't see a way of doing it anytime soon. And the point is, we are carrying a fund balance of $4.2 million more that we actually have, cash. And then people start saying, well, you got this much money in your fund balance, why can't you do this, and why can't you give this, and why can't you fund that? It's happened before.
Why did you do that?
And so that's the issue I have. Let us.
Let's do one at a time.
When you do your checkbook, do you sit down and add another $2,000 into it just to make the balance look larger? I certainly don't, and I don't believe most people do.
And,
that's what
you
asked me to
won't,
be done.
let me finish, because I was going through this sort of step by step.
But
And
they're
and I
two
haven't
different
been
issues.
able to finish. Well, they're not two different issues. They're still the general fund. And it's still the bottom line, the general fund balance effect.
Do this one first, and then we'll talk about that.
Well, and what I want to go back to is, we already talked about and agreed that the Dawn Wastewater Utility Fund was $169,000 a year from the general fund till 2027. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Because, so we're saying that you have a number up here of $234,368 that's due. Is that to the general fund from Dawn?
That is,
And
without sitting down and going through every single transaction since Dawn started, which was in 2005, it was always my understanding, or it's been my understanding, that the board agreed to fund the loan for the Dawn plant. It wasn't recorded that way. It was
And that's
recorded
not-
as a due to from instead of as a just plain out transfer to pay for the debt.
And I'm just walking
And
through the
it's-
numbers
it's
because
cumulative.
I'm walking through the numbers that I'm looking at. I'm just trying to get my head around them. Because I come down further and it says the budgeted amount for Dawn is $368,135.
Yes, sir, you all agreed in this budget year to fund Phase 2 of Dawn.
And that's a one-time expense.
As far as I know.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that I understand the numbers, and I'm just walking through, because at the end of this, I'm just trying to sum up all of this in some form or fashion, since this is our one opportunity to come visit it. And I'm trying to understand what we've spent from the general fund, so that we're all, because we always have this constant discussion about how much has been spent, where it came from, and what the value of it is. You know, we transferred this year $771,000 from the general fund to utilities for
Actually, ended up
operations.
being a little bit more than that.
For operations.
For operations.
A little bit more, that's fine.
We did not transfer any funds to the utility fund for operations. All the transfers to the utility funds have been for debt service payments.
Well, that's a different discussion than we had 2 months ago.
No, it's not either.
It's always been for debt service. Utility fund, the operations are being covered by operating revenue,
And-
with a little bit left over to go to debt service,
Okay.
but not enough to cover the little over $2 million of debt service.
Go ahead.
Ms. Hatcher, say that again. The operations
The operating
for
revenue.
for the water system, for the utility system, are theoretically or actually paying for themselves.
That's correct.
But that's not operations and maintenance.
But that's operations.
Just
Now,
operations.
in this whole operating process, which you can't because you're an accountant, have debt service and operations together. We have operations is basically breaking even. The system's paying for itself. But we ran water lines to Caroline Pines. We added the wastewater treatment plant. That's debt service.
That's correct.
And we did things for schools. So operational wise, we're doing what we should do. Mr. Black's question about the 75 connections is what we were supposed to have to pay for debt service
That's correct.
going forward. So they're all tied together. 10, 15 years ago when we put this together, we didn't just pick 75 out of the air. We went through the financial consultants and said, based on the economy, based on market conditions, this is a conservative number, 75, which was a very good number up until 4 years ago. So that's how it all comes together. And I'm just trying to bring it together. So you have other things, go right ahead.
When you say operations and maintenance goes together. There's
That's correct.
maintenance. So operations and maintenance is being covered by the current utility costs.
That's
That's correct. Rates cover operation and maintenance.
As long as we don't do tank maintenance, which we borrowed money for.
Right. It would be general maintenance, repairs.
Okay.
You know, backhoe out digging up a leak or
Okay.
pump stations, that type of thing. If you-
Placing a pipe here and there, something
That's
like that.
correct. Major maintenance, like a tank painting, is probably, you'd have to start.
Okay.
So that'll be in from now on too. So I think everything but debt service on utilities is being covered.
In fact, a couple of years ago, I forgot whether it was 2010, 2009, that was money left over out of the operating fund in order to transfer some money back to the general fund to help offset some debt. There was one year that you told me there was about $100,000.
Yeah, it was a year.
It was a couple of years ago. I think we said we had $150,000 to transfer over.
I'd like to sit down with her before we finish this, because I don't
This
get
this issue has been talked about, Mr. Steele.
That's
You've
fine,
had
Mr.
months.
Akers.
You've had months to get with and talk about it. If the board is willing to move ahead, I'm willing to move ahead with this
fine.
issue because, that's it's nothing to talk about. The fact is, we know on paper there's $4.2 million that is sitting out there that we do not physically have. It's sitting out there as a loan to the utilities fund. We know that the utilities fund is not going to be able to pay that loan back at any time in the near future. So let's get it out of the general fund balance. Let's get it out of there as far as sitting there.
I agree.
Has the board wish to?
Mr. Akers, can I just ask one thing? I guess, and I just want to make sure on this before I vote. So we're not going to be having this. We're not going to be having this discussion. We're not going to be having this discussion 3 years down the road, are we? Where we have to, where we're talking about the $4 million.
We're not recording any interfund receivables and
So
payables
this is-
anymore.
We're
So-
never going to do that again.
So it's gonna
Strictly
be-
revenue and expense
every year.
each
It's going to
year.
be every year. Whatever transfer we have to do will be done on a yearly basis.
That's
so
correct.
we'll never have to go back and do this again.
That's correct.
Right, we'll never do this again.
This is a one-time deal.
Absolutely. And it's got to be understood that, there were a period of time, Ms. Hatcher certainly has come in here, and you've been with us, what, 4 years, 5 years?
4 years.
Right, 4 years. And she came in during a difficult time, and because it's unfortunate. We had someone that was acting as Director of Finance that did not have the experience to be Director of Finance. But anyway, that's what happened. She has cleared it up, and I say it's time to move ahead. Is there a motion to approve the proposed adjustments to interfund accounts and budget appropriation to reflect the elimination of loan for general fund to utility funds and program income fund, as explained by Mrs. Hatcher?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Taylor. Discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, it's
Yes.
not that I don't agree that we need to clean this up. I just don't understand how we end up with so many things that we can't put together. And I understand time, and I understand that there have been many people in this, but we should certainly be able to put our heads around, if you sit down and look at this long enough, to understand what's here, and I can't.
Well, you appear to be the only one on the board that cannot. I think the rest of us, I think Ms. Hatcher has put together a complete list and a layout here of where the funds were transferred, where they have moved from one account to the next account, and I think it's very, very evident here as to where the funds are coming from and going to, and where they need to be cleared up at. Now, I have not heard the same concerns from other board members that you have expressed, so I'm assuming that you're the only one that cannot get your head around these numbers and what's going on. Further discussion on the board. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, nay.
Nay.
The motion is dissension in the House. Mr. Black, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Mr. Underwood?
Aye.
Mr. Seeley?
Nay.
Mr.
Aye.
Thomas? And I vote aye as well. The motion is carried. All right. Next item is informational calendar items. Mr. Cully? I don't think so.
Just want to, we do have on the calendar all of your community meetings, and there's the legislative reception at Larry's that you had mentioned, Thursday, the 3rd of January of the new year. We do have the holiday employee luncheon scheduled from 12 to 1:30 at Town Hall on Wednesday, the 19th. We'll be using Town Hall. We contacted them and invited the folks from the town and Port Royal to also attend if they would like. That's a cover dish dinner. And then we just put on there the closing. So I don't think there's mainly community meetings this month.
All right. Thank you. Closing board comments. All right.
Yeah, I just got one. Mr. Colley hit on it. I have my second constituent meeting on Monday, December 17th at 7 o'clock in the Lake Landor Clubhouse, and anyone from any district is welcome to attend. Thank you.
I don't have any.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just two. First of all, I'd like to, Mr. and Mrs. Lambert out of our district is constantly here at our meetings. And I think it's good that citizens come out, even though they may not have anything on the agenda. They're here to know what's going on in the county. I just think that more citizens of the county should come to the meetings to hear what really goes on so they're informed. Second, Mr. Chairman, I do have a constituent meeting on the 17th at the Tourism Center at 6:30, and the second meeting will be that's on the 17th of December. Then on Tuesday, the 18th, there's a second meeting at the Frog Level Volunteer Fire Department. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't have any until we had that last discussion, but I just want to make sure that we acknowledge the hard work that Mr. Schiebel has done with the utility system. I remember someone coming here a while back and saying the utility system was bleeding money, and I told them then that was not true, and again, I think we've decided it's not true. So I want to commend Mr. Schiebel on all he's doing, and thank Mrs. Hatcher for all the work she did to get these numbers together. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. I, too, am having a constituent meeting on Monday in the Lake Caroline community. Mr. Weaver, could you check with the executive director or their manager and see if she could put on that new, really nice flashing board that you have over there about my meeting on Monday night? I'd appreciate it, 7 o'clock. And then I'll be at the Lady Smith Library and Ladies at 7 o'clock on the 13th of December. That's the only comments I have. And there's no closed meeting, right? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made, second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.